Good morning, everyone. Happy February. How's it all going? Hope everyone is well and excited for a lesson on analysis, written analysis and how to make it better. A few questions that came through this week. So we are going to get going in a second. Just got to hang out for a minute and just check everyone's here. So our objectives today are a little bit disparate, quite a few things we want to get through. Improving the sophistication of your written analysis, how can we do that? I've got some quick tips to help you to do that. We're going to look at evaluation as a skill. So one of the questions that we got through on Facebook was to think about what that meant and how could we give an example of it in a piece of analysis. So we're going to do that. And another question was again responding to something I mentioned in last week's session about how structure works in poetry. So if you have missed any of the lessons that we're doing through this the Lockdown Lessons initiative, they're all on Skool Cornwall's YouTube site. Please go and jump back in. Not now. No, now stay here later. But you shouldn't need to know anything too much. I'm going to review a few things. But last week we looked at Amanda Gorman's amazing reading, her poem, The Hill We Climb. And we explored juxtaposition as a device that she uses consistently within it. So just to recap, juxtaposition is this. If you haven't read the poem or heard her read it, it's definitely something you should do. It's fantastic. That's my heater kicking in. How lovely. I'm going to turn that off. Probably quite noisy. And it's quite sunny today, so it's not actually that cold here. Fab. Right. I'm going to take... I set you a challenge last week, which was to look at this beginning of this interpretation. This is it. About how Gorman uses juxtaposition in the poem The Hill We Climb. And my challenge to you was, could you write a piece of analysis from this? So could you then develop this into an analytical response? I'm just going to give you a second to have a read of that. So what I'm going to do now is model how to write a hopefully sophisticated piece of analysis to respond to that sort of topic sentence, that beginning interpretation. So how do you do it? What are the steps that you do? Well, the first thing you must do is, of course, we've mentioned here, you're going to focus on juxtaposition, but we need evidence. So the next thing we do is provide quotation. And that can be something, in a fairly simple declarative sentence like this. So Gorman employs juxtaposition when she declares, "We seek harm to none and harmony for all." Now, for today's lesson, because we haven't got time to reread the poem itself, I'm just going to focus on this quotation. That doesn't mean to say that you can only use one quotation in a piece of analysis or in an analytical paragraph. I find it quite frustrating sometimes that is what students think. It's not frustrating, but it is what a common misconception about how you analyse. As long as you are going deep into the quotation that you provide, or the quotations, as long as you extend your analysis, I'm going to show you how to do that here, you can of course use more than one quote. In fact, sometimes it's better to. Okay, so we've got this quotation. Gorman employs juxtaposition when she declares, "We seek harm to none and harmony for all." Is that enough? Well, absolutely no, it's not. The thing is, what you're doing if you just put that piece of analysis, that statement, and thought that was analysis, it's not detailed enough. You will leaving your reader, whether that's your teacher or your examiner, a lot of work to do. Because in that long quotation, well, which parts are juxtaposed? So you have to then extend the analysis. The juxtaposed abstract nouns, harm and harmony, work alongside the second juxtaposition in the sentence, the contrast between none and all. So why is this better? So it's better, it's going to get you, if you were thinking that way, more marks. It's better because it's specific. You're re-quoting the specific words or ideas that are working to create meaning. Can you see anything else that's better about this second and developed analysis? So how does that second sentence, that second paragraph that's on the screen now, improve from that first quite simple statement? The other thing it does is, oops, I should make it super clear actually. If you want to get involved in the lesson, please just pop a comment in the comment box and we can have a bit of a dialogue about what's going on. All right, so the second sentence is better because it applies the further terminology. You don't have to do that, but that extra little term there, abstract nouns, shows the examiner, shows your teacher that you can use other terms and that will elevate the quality of your analysis. Okay, what else can we do with this then? Where else can we take it? You have to make sure that you explain the effect or the impact of that juxtaposition. Okay, so if we've identified it, we've shown exactly where it's happening, but so what? What's the effect on the reader? What's the effect on the audience? What's its impact? And here I've done that. So the impact is a message of peace and unity, of healing. Given the violent riots prior to the inauguration, this message has particular potency and importance at this point in American history. Now, Toby mentioned this yesterday. What I've done here is complete my interpretation through through the application of context. And in some exams, using context not only is helpful in terms of enabling you to create strong interpretations, but actually will get you extra marks. So something to think about is, what are you being assessed on? What are the AOs, the assessment objectives for the exam you're sitting? And do you get marks for context? If you do, you must ensure you talk about it. And it can be helpful to talk about it at the end of an analytical paragraph to explain your interpretation. Okay, my next top tip about improving the sophistication of your analysis is to do with something we began with last week. So I said when we read The Hill We Climb, can you come up with some words to talk about its effect, its kind of emotional effect on you? How does it feel when you hear it? How did you feel? What's the tone that Gorman imbues in this amazing poem? And we came up with these sorts of words. And it's easy to change these adjectives into adverbs. And once we've done that, we've actually got a really nice little toolkit for analysis. So passionate becomes passionately, etc., etc. Okay, so see how I'm going to use this to improve the sophistication very, very quickly of my analysis. So what we've got here is at the top is the first two sentences as before. And can you see what I've done? The red words. I'm going to just reread that to you now. Gorman forcefully employs evocative juxtaposition when she declares, "We seek harm to none and harmony for all." The juxtaposed abstract nouns, harm and harmony, work successfully alongside the second juxtaposition in the sentence, the contrast between none and all. I've embedded these words that we had anyway, these adjectives and some adverbs as well, into my analysis, and it helps me to respond to the changing and shifting tones and emotions in the texts very astutely. It's a sensitive way of writing and it's fairly easy to do. Okay. The next thing we're going to have a look at is evaluation. What is evaluation? So evaluative comments are really important in analysis, and they're often the most difficult to do. In fact, as a skill, it's one of the higher order skills, and it sits in kind of the top levels of the mark scheme. So if you're going to be aiming for if you were thinking just in terms of an examination, if you're going to be aiming for the top levels, then you do need to use evaluative comments. So they can weigh up a text's most successful aspects, or most striking or shocking or surprising or humorous, anything really, anything that you think has that stands out really. Evaluative comments can often consider blah blah blah, get the words out, the impact on the audience, whether that's the reader or the viewer or listener. and are aided actually with the use of adjectives and adverbs in the way that we've just discussed. Let's have a look at an example of evaluation, but before I do, you need to understand this term. So a morpheme is the smallest functioning unit of letters in a word. So it's not a syllable, it's not a sound, it's about the actual components of the word. So the word played has two morphemes in it, play and ed. And there are lots of different definitions and things we could go into linguistically, but for now that's enough. So some morphemes, like the word play, in the word played, can stand on their own. Some of them cannot, and they will probably be something like this, which is a suffix. The suffix ed makes it the past tense of that verb. Look how I've used that term, but also how I've embedded a piece of evaluation into my paragraph to finish this off. And it's that third paragraph that's new. So obviously third paragraph, let's read it together. The real power in Gorman's writing comes from the precision of her language choices. Not only are the ideas of doing harm and being in harmony effective in their contrast, the morpheme harm, employed in both words, creates in sound the message of harmony she's communicating. So we've got this kind of parallel actual sound, parallel morpheme, and I'm saying that that's pretty clever. So the way I've done that right at the top, the real power of Gorman's writing comes from the precision of her language choices. So, evaluation, consider the most striking, successful, powerful aspects of a text, consider the impact on the audience, and try and use adjectives and adverbs. Okay, so we had a question come through this week about something I mentioned in the last session. And it's to do with this diagram here. And I'd said that poetry, I think, is one of the most important forms of literature partly because it employs so many aspects of the others. And the aspect that we got asked about was visual art. So how is poetry a visual art? And particularly when I was talking about how amazing Gorman's reading of The Hill We Climb was. So do you know how poetry could be considered to be a visual art? Have you experienced a poem visually? One of my favourite things to do when I used to teach Year 7 classes was to do this, because every student got engaged and involved and created something beautiful, actually, because poetry can be art and artistic, and you don't have to, in the examples I'm going to talk about right now, necessarily use beautiful imagery and sophisticated words or complex metaphors, so it's very accessible. So, that's not what we want this one. There we go. This is an example of concrete poetry. So it's an example of how poetry can be seen to be a visual art. The way that the meaning is being made here is about the way the words are arranged on the page, the kind of graphological elements of it, the positioning of the words rather than necessarily the words themselves, although of course they pertain to it, apple. It is about the shape. Not all poets or poems use shape to create meaning, but when they do, they can be really effective. So we're just going to have a little look at this poem by Roger McGough. So it does use structure to convey meaning, and we'll want to have a little think about it. So let's read it together, and then I'd like you to have a little think and pop some ideas in the comment box about how this poem structure conveys its meaning. So, 40 love, Roger McGough. Middle-aged couple playing tennis. When the game ends and they go home, the net will still be between them. Okay, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes. How does the poem structure convey its meaning? All right, so there's lots of things we could consider here. We could look at the columns. We could look at the space between the words, and try and figure out how that links to what McGough is trying to say. So in case it's not super clear, it seems to be that he's trying to convey to us a tennis match, or a tennis, yeah, very good, Evie. It's separate, like they are separated because of the net, exactly that. So we've got this kind of white space, this chunk of white space right in the middle of the page, and then either side of this sort of, it's not represented in a line, but with its white space of this net, we've got each of the players, one side of the couple. Absolutely, Chloe, two sides of love. Oh, yeah. And they're separated, aren't they? There's a gap between them. Yes, Evie, different sides, different perspectives. Fantastic. It does very much seem that they are not on the same page, just as the words aren't together, neither are they. Not only that, the words themselves, so it's not just that they've got this huge space between the words. By line 3, the words themselves become fractured and broken. Tennis. And it's actually quite hard to read it. It's hard to read some of parts of this poem, particularly the bottom, but still be between them. The breaks seem to become more profound and more severe. So yeah, McGough is employing structure very, very cleverly to convey their broken relationship. Something else we could consider structurally is that he's chosen, as the final point on the left hand side that we've made here, that he doesn't use any punctuation. So there's no capital letters, and obviously no full stop at the end. And there's also no adjectives as well, but all of this adds this feeling of bareness and absence. It doesn't even look like a proper sentence. And it's, again, potentially suggestive of that kind of cold nature of their relationship. We could re-employ the term we learned earlier, because what McGough is doing really is breaking some of the words into morphemes. And this creates this really staccato, monosyllabic, fractured tone, which is why for such a short poem is really, really quite clever. Okay, so next question. We've had a little look at structure, and I want to try and embed some of the learning we did earlier about analysis and how to improve the sophistication of it. So the poem's title, 40 Love, can you explain to me how it works? 40 Love. Why has McGough titled the poem 40 Love? So 40 Love, I think it's one of the most interesting or clever and aspects of the poem. I suppose if you don't play tennis or watch it, it might not quite hit the mark. So for the way that tennis is scored is to go up from 15 to 30 to 40. And if you haven't scored any points, then you don't say 0, you say love. So one person in this tennis match is doing pretty well. Yes, Chloe, is a tennis term. So 40 is the points and love means 0. So that person hasn't scored at all. 40 love means that one of the people is doing really well, they're about to win the game, and the other one hasn't got any points at all. Why do you think that's important? How does that help communicate his message about their relationship? So how does 40 Love communicate something about the nature of this couple's relationship. One person's winning and one person's losing. That this is a game or a relationship where there's some kind of battle happening and there is a winner and a loser. And to consider a relationship like that is pretty depressing. They're not in a good space. So that net, that battleground still exists even when they go home, and he's communicating that even through the title, but it seems to suggest a winner and a loser. And of course as well, it's a slight pun because this is he's suggesting love at 40. Okay, so I'd like you to have a go at how we could add some evaluative adjectives or adverbs. Oh, okay, that's an interesting idea. The one is 40 is committed, the one with love is not. Very good. Oh my gosh, they're not giving anything to the relationship. I've never thought of it like that. That's a really, really good interpretation. Yeah, the person with 0 points just doesn't care anymore, isn't doing anything. Yeah, love it. Brilliant. Okay, so you should run with that, Chloe. I think that's one of the best interpretations of that title I've seen. So let's look at doing this, that really, really simple way of improving the sophistication of our analysis that we discussed earlier. So where could we add evaluative adjectives or adverbs to this analysis? So this is what I've written about the title. Where could we put some adjectives or adverbs into it? So McGough's pun in the title conveys not only that this is what love looks like in middle age, as in it's love, 40, love at 40, nor that the poem's conceit is a tennis match, but that someone is winning and someone is losing. The relationship has become a game or a battle to be won. So where could we add the adjectives or some adjectives or adverbs to explain the tone or the feelings that you had when you read it? So my tip for this is to look for device nouns and place the adjectives before them. So an example of that is, instead of saying the simile, you could say the shocking simile. Instead of saying alliteration, you could say aggressive alliteration, obviously depending on what quotation you were selecting from the text. This is called pre-modification, but don't worry about that necessarily. All you're doing is you're putting the adjective before the noun. So can you have a go at that? Can you try and find where you could put some adjectives into this analysis? So this is what I've done here. So I've selected the device nouns, pun and metaphor. McGough's, instead of saying McGough's pun in the title, I've said his playful pun. And instead of saying poem's central conceit or metaphor, I actually have changed the terms there. I've said it's artful central metaphor, which means it's clever and considered. And these single words, just two, elevate the analysis and make it more sophisticated and more sensitive. And it's a very, very simple way, this tip here, pre-modifying device nouns, of increasing the fluency and sensitivity of your analytical writing. And if you take nothing else away from today, it would be to try and do that next time you do a piece of analysis. What's the tone? Get some great adjectives, switch them into adverbs so you can use it, obviously with verbs as well. And where then can you embed them as you're writing? And if you get to the end of a piece of analytical writing and you haven't done it, you could always go back and do it. Just find those device nouns and pre-modify them, put them in. And it can really, as I said, elevate the sophistication and the fluency of your writing. So, where are we up to? So what have we done today? We've done quite a few different little things today. So to summarise what we've explored and kind of the key takeaways from it, when you're analysing, ensure it's precise. Re-quote the elements of the larger quote you've used to show exactly which words are working to convey meaning. Use adjectives and adverbs, as we've just said, to create sensitive, evaluative and sensitive comments. Think about pre-modifying technique with device nouns. and use context to support your interpretations where appropriate. We will be back tomorrow at 11 o'clock, and we will be here next week as well. As ever, please tell other people that we're here, share the videos, share our Facebook page, and subscribe to make sure you receive notifications during the week. And yeah, have a great one, guys. Thank you so much for contributing today. Chloe and Evie, fantastic work, and see you next week.